Hamidakia biwa sinchante washtena bech usapie wichankhbi iotawin demiye autumn Cavender hemakiapie damakota ka wachbet mondokota hemachaye pejuta zizik abimokoche hemataha. My name in English is Autumn Cavender, in Dakota my name is Wichankhbi Iotawi, and this is Wowiackekage, or Weaving Realities. I never wanted to be an artist. In fact, I had a lot of impressions that artists were very, very snooty, and it's very difficult to conceive of myself as a capital A artist. I actually, because I couldn't really draw, at least to my satisfaction, in elementary school, I just decided that I wasn't artistic, and I kind of wrote it off for the rest of my life. My poor cousins had been trying to teach me beadwork for years and had all but given up on me. But it was actually really through my work as a midwife. I do home birth out in my home community and in the surrounding areas. And for the families that I served, I was being asked to create culturally specific items for them and for their families around this period of time with birth. And so I wanted to be able to rise to that, to fulfill that role, but I also didn't want to kind of half-ass it. I wanted to be actually good at the things that I was making and the designs that I was creating for different families. And so I rededicated myself to learning the technical praxis of how to create various traditional items and the cultural aesthetics to accompany them. And so after the birth of my first son, I jumped at the opportunity to apprentice with master quill workers from Flandreau. And one of the things that I really loved about this apprenticeship is that it wasn't just about teaching the technical praxis of quill work. It was really about the artistic methodology, the stories, the cosmology, the origin of where this art form came from, and how one sees in that aesthetic, how one sees in that design work. And so I really began with florals and quill wrap work in that regard. And that's really, I guess, kind of how I got into art more generally. How I got into digital art is actually even funnier. During the early days of the pandemic, during early lockdown, my partner and I got really into NFTs and digital art, and had kind of started kind of feeling out that scene and really experimenting or seeing other people's experiments with AI and generative tech. And for me, one of the things that I had realized in the course of my quill working was that very few people knew how to see in traditional geometrics anymore. They could see in florals, they could see in pictographs, they could see in all of these other different art forms, but most of the geometrics that we were seeing were either copied from older historical designs, or they were just being kind of made up because they were aesthetically pleasing. And there's nothing wrong with either of those things, but with the methodology that I was taught with quill work as a storytelling medium, for me, I really wanted to train my eye to see in geometrics. And so that's really how I came to digital art. I wondered if the generative and AI tech that I was seeing with so many other different pieces could be used and at least start as a beginning point in helping me learn how to see in geometrics as an art form. And that's kind of how we came to here. If we're looking at Dakota art specifically as a storytelling medium, it seemed logical to me to begin with audio. With, we are a people of oral tradition, and so to begin with audio and to kind of see where we would run from there. So experimenting actually with old DJ tech from the 1990s and hacking those kinds of programs and utilizing computers that are dinosaurs now, really kind of messing with them. And I came up with things that were aesthetically pleasing but not Dakota. I came up with a lot of things that were just ugly. I came up with things that were aesthetically Dakota but not super pretty, nor were they really super referential to the topic matter at hand. But finally, actually, through one of the pieces that's here in this exhibit, Zuyao Dongwa, it's a war song, a marching off to war song, and this was the first time where I plugged the audio in, and after manipulation of the outcome, what became clear actually were tracks within the generated design. So now I had something that created something aesthetically pleasing, that was aesthetically Dakota, and was self-referential back to the original audio file. I got really excited at that point, and really, really pumped about the potential of it. And after additional program tweaking, I began to plug other things in, and began to see the exact same thing. Images that came that were referential to the original topic matter, to the original audio files being plugged in, which for me is absolutely fascinating. Obviously with any other kind of work, and I think a lot of different artists or craftspeople who make things, they get very nervous sometimes when presenting the things that they make, worried about other people's opinions. Is this good? But with this, I definitely feel more as if I'm somebody articulated it as audio archaeology. I'm a co-creator along with something very, very old and very, very ancient, and utilizing more or less a ghost in the machine to uncover what this song, what this audio, what this particular file has to say in a visual way. From beginning, usually there's some kind of, I guess there's two ways. One is that I come across an audio file that's super cool and I want to use it. The other way is that I receive some kind of prompt or some kind of inspiration where I want to kind of play with a particular, where I'm going out to seek an audio file to fulfill a certain capacity. Really, for me, one of the things that I love working with actually are wax cylinder recordings from the 1800s that have been digitized, mostly because a lot of our people don't have access to those songs anymore. They don't have access to those audio files, and many of them are deemed to be like culturally sensitive materials, even by museums and things, so they're not actually readily available. But utilizing those recordings, then I can actually create something that's visible for a much wider audience, because it's not the actual culturally sensitive material itself, right? So in the case of, like Zuya Odoa, where I'm using this like audio file and then running it through to kind of see what it looks like. So I get an origin piece, more or less, after I take this out of the audio file, the beginnings of this generative quill work. And then I take that and I throw it on an iPad, usually through Procreate, and I work on manipulating that image and expanding it out until we begin to see like the larger patterns that you can see in the work in this exhibit. One of the biggest frustrations of working in any sphere as an Indigenous person is the continued allocation of indigeneity to a historical context. It is a necessary part of the colonial project that we be either disappeared or disappearing. We're not actually allowed to be contemporary people and do contemporary things, because if we are, then it kind of brings the whole colonial narrative crashing down, right? The idea within Manifest Destiny that it is the right of colonial society to exist on Indigenous territory is deeply complicated if Native people are still around, right? And so as an artist, as a, I have a background in education, obviously in midwifery as well, and anytime we are always kind of allocated to these historical pieces. One of the things that is deeply exciting to me about this particular work is the ways in which it demonstrates that not only are Indigenous art forms contemporary and capable of being contemporary, but that the very ancient and ancestral methodologies that were applied in original ancestral art forms, pre-contact, pre-colonial art forms, is still relevant and applicable, utilizing today's media and tech. And that to me is ridiculously exciting, because then we're not just, it's not just a replication of new design or old design into a new format. It's a direct application of artistic methodology that is very, very ancient, but is still actively relevant. And that's really exciting to me. I got into artwork in general because of my work as a midwife, and in no small part because of my work with my own children. And so the things that they're excited about and the things that they want to make and to help with are really, really important to me. And so like a big part of this exhibit with the earlier work in the exhibit is actually moccasins or shoes that I've made for my boys. You know, old quill work, old bead work, and the ways in which you know, art forms in many ways, like Dakota art is about utility. It's not something that just hangs on a wall, right? It's about useful items. And so, you know, you show your love and dedication to your children, to your family, to the people around you by making them beautiful things, knowing that they're going to break, knowing that they're going to fall apart, because that's what it means when something is well loved and well used. You make the things that you use on a daily basis beautiful. So really where I draw a lot of inspiration for a lot of my work is from my children. And I think like most Indigenous artists, a huge amount of my inspiration comes from not just the historical legacies of colonization and genocide that we carry with us, but also from land and from land base, and the intimate relationship that peoples who have co-evolved with the land over several thousand generations, that connection is just very, very deep and really serves as a necessary piece of inspiration and context for any art that is created. My favorite part of the creation process is after I've taken the origin image and have started to kind of replicate it out and match it, and watching the designs come to life through it. None of the designs in any of these generative quill works are planned. I don't manipulate the images in order to create any of the designs that are seen in this exhibit. They are all spontaneously created themselves by the audiophile. And so for me, when they first become apparent, that is the most exciting part to me, because, you know, usually there's that first moment of like, oh, what is that? And then, you know, as it kind of hits you, you get really, really pumped about it. You know, for me, I've had the wonderful opportunity at this point in time to have exhibited my work internationally, you know, just through different digital and NFT events. And for me, though, again, being from a place means something, and it is actually really super important for me to tour my work and pursue opportunities very locally. That ultimately, within anything, you know, talking about the utility of Indigenous art, right? Really, this is a very personal opinion of mine, it's only good if your community says it is. It's only useful if your community says it is. And so this for me is a really big part of my general accountability to local community, you know, within my home state, within my home territory, to bring it to as many places as I can. And to, you know, one, you know, show that work, but two, to get the feedback, you know. Is this helpful? Is it useful? Does it push the conversation in the right directions, or is it having unintended consequences that I'm not particularly fond of? And that those are also, like, that's all really important feedback to me and a really big part of my community activism and work that I do more generally. I'm very satisfied with how things came together for this exhibit. The team was ridiculously helpful in terms of getting everything set up. This is really hilarious considering the kind of work that I'm exhibiting, but I actually really suck at utilizing most modern technology. And so I was very terrified at the idea of like trying to hook up this like new fancy projector with some crazy machine that talks wirelessly between computers. It was very intimidating, but to have people who were just super excited and just very down to help me figure it out was really, really lovely. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure working with the staff here. Honestly, a lot of my new projects, if you will recall, like doing porcupine quill work was my original like main primary art form, and the entire purpose of all of this was to help me see better in geometrics, and so that I could better create physical pieces with original geometric designs that fit within a Dakota methodological and aesthetic trajectory. And so for me now, a lot of this is about translating these images back into physical pieces of quill work, and so that's going to be really, really fun. I'm also definitely on like low key. I just got a really big art fellowship, and so I'm going to be working on experimenting with, instead of, this is all generative tech, right? And so I have now an opportunity to work with AI generative tech, and I'm hoping to do some very similar things, creating libraries of historical parfletch designs and figuring out how can we again create originals utilizing AI and generative tech. So that's really exciting. When viewing any of these pieces, I would just remind any viewer that these are not, these are audio files. They are sound made into picture. And one of the interesting things about digital art in general, and NFTs in particular, that I kind of want to touch on is that it really challenges conventional Western notions of what art is and what an original is. None of the pieces here on exhibit are originals. These are all digital files that were then printed in some way, either onto canvas, through a projector, onto paper, and none of those things are the originals. Now, when we get then to the question of what is an original when it comes to digital art, is it the JPEG file? Is it the original origin piece that I ran through that DJ tech before I began to manipulate it? Is it the poster? Is it the NFT? One of these pieces or two of these pieces are NFTs that are owned by different people. So neither of these are the original. Is the original the audio file? And in that case, particularly when those audio files come from museum archives, what is even the original there? Is it the person who sang it? Is it the wax cylinder? Is it the digital rendition of that wax cylinder recording? And so when we talk about originality, when we talk about provenance, one of the things I've kind of come to realize, or decide at least for myself, is that the original is actually the design in the abstract, out in the ether, unfinished form. A really fantastic example of that really exists in Dakota quill work, in that if I create an original design for somebody and I embroider it in quill work on something, on a bag, for instance, for somebody, and then in 10 years, maybe I've passed away, or maybe I'm not around anymore, and then that quill work needs repair. Maybe somebody else repairs it. Maybe they add their own additions to that design. And then maybe that design becomes a family design, something that's passed down generationally, and then people are continually replicating that design. Who has the original? And who owns it? And, it really messes with the idea of ownership. It messes with the idea of originality. But that the original of anything is actually the idea. It's the pattern. It's the design itself, not the medium that it's portrayed through. And I think that's a really difficult idea, particularly with the commodification of art and the copyrights and all of those other things. Who owns what? But I think when we step out of that idea of strict ownership and provenance, we really begin to get into some really cool places about pushing the definition of what is art, and what can it be, and what are the mediums that art actually exists in.